Thank you, Bob, and good morning, everyone. It's just wonderful to be here to be able to address this gathering of my esteemed colleagues, and for me, new colleagues, of the Massachusetts Biotechnology Council. And it's particularly an honor since the Bill and Melinda Gates Medical Research Institute, we're the new kids on the block. In fact, you might call us the new infants in the nursery, because we just opened our doors on January 2nd with the first employees starting then. And I will say, yes, we're measuring our growth milestones by the nor'easter of the week. And Bob, I should say for new startups in the support package, what you need to do is make sure they know that the office closure policy needs to be very early on, written early on. You're like, oh God, we've got to close the office. What do we do? What's our policy? So, but it is truly a pleasure to be here. To be able to talk about the Gates MRI, Gates Medical Research Institute. And I think the best way to think about it is, think about it like a nonprofit biotech that's focused on the diseases of the poorest. We believe that those diseases that disproportionately affect the poor, they deserve the same attention, the same cutting-edge technology, the same sophisticated approaches that the diseases of the rich do. And so for the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about how we hope to fulfill that vision. But first, I want to introduce myself just very briefly and talk about my journey. So I have been fascinated with infectious diseases since I was a little kid, even before I got into elementary school. And the reason why I think that I was such a geek is that my father had tuberculosis a couple years before I was born. And he would talk to us about it, and because I think he feared that it would reactivate and that he would pass it to me and my siblings. Now, while I should have been scared, frightened, etc., I was instead just mostly fascinated by the fact that there was this microbe that was living in his lung asleep, and that it could wake up and he could cough it out and I could get it and get tuberculosis. So I would find pictures and draw it, etc. And that really, I think, started me off on this career of infectious diseases. I became interested in global health in particular after I finished my pediatric infectious diseases fellowship and had a long-term study that I did with the Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta in Kenya, looking at diarrheal diseases in infants born to HIV-infected mothers. And at the end of my 2-year study, I studied about 400 new babies that were born to these mothers. Over 52 had died. And out of the 52, 26 had diarrheal disease at the time of death, and 26 had respiratory disease at the time of death. That changes your perspective forever. I mean, what do we have to offer these mothers? You know, for diarrheal diseases, we could offer them, you know, we could tell them, well, boil your water, build latrines, safe water, good sanitation, that's what's important. But those things, unfortunately, were out of reach for these villages in Kenya. And so that's what sparked my interest in industry. About that time, I got an email recruiting me to Merck to work on a diarrheal vaccine. I was like, aha, now that's an intervention that could be feasible for these villages while their economies grow and while they get to the point where they can provide safe water and good sanitation for their populations. So I went, and it's just been an incredible journey, and now I have the incredible good fortune to take all the things that I learned in the private sector and to get back to those low-income countries and to realize the impact of what we have in the rich world and what that can be for the poor world. So to talk a little bit more about the Institute, how it came about, the concept really emerged about exactly a year ago. We were having our annual strategic reviews at the foundation, and there were a couple of things that really stood out to me in these reviews. One was we've made amazing progress in some areas. AIDS deaths have been cut nearly in half with the amazing antiretrovirals that we have and programs like PEPFAR. Meningitis in the sub-Saharan Africa meningitis belt Meningitis A has killed thousands and thousands of people every year. A new vaccine that the foundation funded through PATH, Manafrovac, has literally wiped meningitis A off of that area and out of those countries. Polio has been amazing. This is the last year that we will likely see polio on the face of the earth. And because of that, I thought I would quickly recap the story of polio. So, we don't think about it here anymore here in the U.S. The last case here in the U.S. was in 1979. But polio is a virus that infects the neuronal cells in the spinal cord, in the brain. It can cause weakness of the limbs, paralysis. It can cause paralysis of the respiratory muscles. You can see here the children that had to be assisted their breathing with the iron lung. And there were 2 polio vaccines that were invented here in the U.S., thanks largely to scientists right here in Cambridge in the 1950s. And what this picture shows is people lined up around the block to receive these new vaccines. Quite different from some of the reactions we get to vaccination today. But amazing progress made with the last cases in the U.S. in 1979. But then what about the rest of the world? There were 350,000 cases of polio occurring every year globally at that time. So in 1988, the WHO with the Centers for Disease Control and Rotary all came together and said, we want to get rid of polio off the face of the earth. So they started the Eradication Initiative and did that with an oral vaccine, and that effort has been amazing. Almost 30 years now in 200 countries with 20 million volunteers, many of them paying with their lives in giving polio vaccine in remote villages, and almost 3 billion children vaccinated. And this is a picture one of my colleagues took of a polio worker swimming across a flooded area in Bangladesh with oral polio vaccine to get it to children on the other side. And, well, that vaccine certainly worked. This is polio, and in red here you see the countries that were endemic with polio in 1988. This is 1991, 1995, 2000, 2006, 2013, and today we've had, in 2017, we had 22 cases, down from 350,000, and this year to date we've had 3 cases. They're all in 2 countries, Pakistan and Afghanistan, right on that border between the 2 countries. Both countries are making incredible efforts to get the final children vaccinated so that we won't see polio anymore. And the other amazing thing about this, there's been a huge shortage of the inactivated polio vaccine, which is the vaccine that will be used after eradication. Of course, we already use it here in the U.S. The Foundation's been working with multiple partners around the world, including, again, some right here in Cambridge, and we anticipate that by 2020 we'll have sufficient supply for all children globally to get their IPV vaccine. So just an amazing effort. So what if we could do the same thing with these diseases that we've done with polio? We still have over 500,000 kids that die every year from diarrheal disease. We have almost that many that are dying from malaria. And unfortunately, I was just at a meeting last week in Geneva where we're learning that the number of cases of malaria is starting to rise rather than to continue to go down. TB is staggering. I had not really studied TB or been deeply involved with it until we started to think about the Institute. And there's 1.7 million deaths from TB every year for people who weren't as fortunate as my father to have access to the therapies and the good drugs that are out there. So last year when we were putting the business case together for the Institute, I asked the team, I said, can we just add these up and see where we really are with respect to overall mortality? And the numbers are staggering. The statistic that they came up with is together these 3 diseases cause 4 deaths every minute. So talk about urgency and need and the strong reason to be here and to be applying the latest technologies to these diseases. This is the reason why we do it. So our mission is quite simple. It's to find solutions for these diseases so that everyone can have the opportunity to live a healthy life. We want to reduce the inequity. We want to reduce the poverty that is occurring because of these diseases. So our mission is very much aligned with that of the foundation. We want to develop the products that are needed to end diarrheal disease deaths in children by 2030, to eradicate malaria by 2040, and to accelerate the end of the TB epidemic. Right now, it's going down about 2% a year. We want that rate to be minus 17% a year. So that's our mission. So who are we and how are we going to do this? These are what we call our mantras, our beliefs. And you see these words. I'm sure many of you have them in your lobbies. We, at the Institute, are defining them very specifically for us. What does this mean for us? Urgency. Yes, we made some great progress, as I've noted, but we still have these incredible challenges, these 4 deaths that are occurring every minute. So we can't rest on our previous accomplishments, but we always have to be striving to do better and to find the next solution. Collaboration. These diseases are incredibly difficult to tackle. They're genetically complex. These are not RNA viruses. These are very complex parasites, bacteria that are genetically and immunologically complex and are going to take a different approach than what we've been trying. We've tried the usual approaches that we tried for other antiviral vaccines. They don't work. We have to try something different, and it's going to take the collective genius of all of us to do this and to be innovative and to solve these disease areas. And finally, rigor. You know, I don't know how many of you all have read Richard Harris's book called Rigor Mortis. But it just talks about the importance of rigor in the discovery and early preclinical work that we're doing, and to make sure that as we get results that we're confirming those results and that we're moving forward with the highest quality research possible so that we can trust in what we're doing and we don't waste precious resources, especially for these diseases where resources are really limited, but that we really focus on the highest probability of success products. So how we are working, we are going to really be thinking about how do we structure the organization so that we have the greatest probability of success. And so in thinking about it, I looked back over my work in the private sector. I've looked back over my work in at the foundation. You know, at the foundation, we were supporting about 104 different vaccines in the portfolio. And I looked at, well, what are the bottlenecks? What are the problems? What slows us down? What causes the delays? And, you know, by far and away, the #1 delay is CMC manufacturing development. And that was true in the private sector. It was true at the foundation as well. So in thinking about that, I said, well, that's one area I want to make sure that we build really strongly within the Institute. We can outsource some things, but we need to make sure we have very good CMC experts there. Translational scientists. These diseases, as I said, are really, really tough. We need to have scientists who are really curious, who are thinking from a different perspective, who are asking the right questions, who are designing the right studies so that we can quickly get data, iterate on that data, learn from it, and continue to move forward with the next study. So really looking for those, they're unique. You know them when you talk to them. I'm a clinician. These translational scientists, they're incredibly unique. And that is who we need as leaders in the organization to really drive the solutions forward. Quantitative sciences. I think that has been highly underutilized in the global health space, particularly in the vaccine space. I know at the foundation, my group sat right by the drug group. They were doing all this modeling and simulation and really using quantitative sciences to help predict what their dose and regimen was. We aren't doing any of that in the vaccine side. So again, that cross-collaboration across disciplines and really bringing sophisticated quantitative sciences into the global health space, where we're using data, if it's microbiome, if it's genome, if it's clinical data, if it's natural history data, whatever it is, but making sure we have the right data structure and the right talent there to be able to capitalize on it so that every study that we design, we're getting the most out of it. And then finally, the bioassays. I mean, I don't have to talk to this group about the importance of biomarkers and the importance of immune correlates of protection. We have tools now that we have never had before. We didn't have 5 to 10 years ago. I mean, I was looking yesterday at the foundation at a tool that's in development where we can screen 5 million B cells and start to understand the specific antibodies that might provide protection against a disease very, very quickly. So it's just incredible what we can do now and how we can much more purposefully develop and move forward vaccines and other products than we have in the past. So our scope is going to be that translational space, that so-called valley of death that's so difficult for any area that you're working in, particularly difficult for these diseases. We are going to start in that early preclinical space. In fact, we have some talent that'll be able to reach upstream and help if there's academic investigators or others who have constructs or compounds that they're working on that they want to bring into the institute that can help optimize those compounds and those constructs. We'll take them from that preclinical time through proof of concept in the target population, and then we will hand off to a late phase development partner. We don't envision building big commercial facilities or doing large phase 3 studies, but rather handing off to phase 3 or late phase development partner. The disease areas and modalities are listed here. I've already talked about the fact that we're focusing on malaria, tuberculosis, and enteric diseases. We are looking for solutions to those diseases. We're not wed to a given technology platform. We're not wed to a given modality, vaccine, drug, antibody. So we will be looking across the different modalities, across the different disease areas to find solutions. And some people may call me crazy for thinking like this, but I really, because this is a broad mission and to take on, but I think it's really important to break down the silos. I mean, when I was at the foundation, I supported vaccine development for all the different disease areas, and I would get so frustrated because I would be in an HIV scientific advisory meeting, and I would see the sophisticated immunology and immunoprofiling that they were doing on HIV, and then I would go to an enteric disease advisory meeting like Shigella, and they were pretty much doing things like they were back in the 1990s. It's like, why aren't we talking to each other? Same with TB, it's just so far behind. So how can we break down the silos and really bring expertise from the different infectious disease areas together, expertise from the different modalities, I think the vaccine world has a lot to learn from drugs. How can we bring it all together so that we can advance things more quickly? And so what we're doing now is we're actually looking at our early portfolio, which includes TB drugs, TB vaccines. We have a novel malaria vaccine, as well as a couple malaria monoclonals, and the Shigella vaccine that we're moving forward now. And we're building out what we call innovation roadmaps and thinking about, okay, where are the gaps? Where have they been? How can we start to fill in those gaps, and what do we need to do? So for TB drugs, certainly we actually have a really interesting program at the foundation where companies have opened up their compound libraries for us to screen for hits against TB. And so we've got quite a pipeline that's accumulating. How can we down select early so as we move things into the pipeline, we're moving things in that have the highest probability of success? Now, with TB, you have to have a combination regimen for TB. And so the question then becomes, okay, how do we decide which combinations to use? Where's the synergy? Right now, if we took all the drugs that we have in the pipeline and took them through all the possible combinations, it's like 1,400 trials. We did 5 doses for each trial. We've got 650,000 exposures. That's not possible. So obviously, we're going to have to develop ways to down select, use our quantitative scientists to really help us get the most out of each study. We desperately need biomarkers for TB disease. We're looking at cell-free DNA and some other biomarkers. And how can we do that and have continuous clinical trial platforms where we can move new drugs through continuously and hopefully get to the answer quickly. We will need partners to do this. We're going to be obviously partnering with academia, biotech, big pharma on the upstream space for products that are coming through. We'll take them through that translational space, and then, as I said, hand off to a late phase development partner, which would either be pharma or a low-income country manufacturer with a product development partner. We have a few options there that we're working on. So just some few quick facts about the Gates MRI. We are headquartered here in Cambridge in the Boston area. We plan to stay here. We are funded by the foundation. The business plan is 15 years, and we have funding for the first 4 years because that's the foundation's funding cycle. I've talked about the initial portfolio already. As far as our size, we anticipate probably a maximum size of around 120, getting up to about maybe 50 this year. I think it'll be more like 35 or 40. And we are currently working on that portfolio, as I said, starting to get the asset evaluation teams in place, the innovation roadmaps, and get our quality systems in place and up and going. So we are truly a startup right in the beginning. As I said, we're so happy to be here in Cambridge. It's just been such a warm welcome. I cannot tell you how many partners have already reached out, how many meetings we've already had. It's just been incredible. So thank you all for the incredible partnership, and I just can't wait to see what can happen here. The potential is enormous with the talent that's here, the technology that's here, the cross-collaboration that I'm already seeing. I think that this can truly be an incredible success, and we can really realize success in our overall bottom line, which is the number of lives saved. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I wish you a really fruitful rest of the meeting, and hopefully the nor'easter won't make it too bad.